Evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, terrific. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you all for coming. It's my pleasure and honor to be here speaking to you today. My name is Steve Frantz. I'm with the Iowa Donor Network. Anyone familiar with what we do at the Iowa Donor Network? Terrific. Okay. So we are the organ and tissue procurement agency for the state of Iowa. And we are also the call center for the Iowa Lions Eye Bank. So I'm going to talk this evening about the difference between organ donation, tissue donation, and cornea donation, and also how it relates to age of donor and how it relates to the University of Iowa Deeded Body Program. Okay? So I would encourage you, we have a small group here, I would really love to have as much interaction as possible. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, please don't hesitate, just let me know. You don't have to wait till the end. Let's have a conversation so that I can make sure I answer all of your questions and that you have a full understanding of the option of donation. Sound fair? Okay. So, as I mentioned, I'm with the Iowa Donor Network. This is work that I'm very, very passionate about. Does anyone in the room have a personal connection to donation that they would like to share? Please don't feel obligated. Maybe you have a family member who is a donor, or you have a family member who is a recipient, or you are a recipient. No? Okay. Oh.
I donated my body about 50 years ago.
Okay. So you're on a part of the Deeded Body Program at the University of Iowa. Okay, terrific. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. Great cause, obviously. That's fantastic.
I'm just curious tonight. You should ask how many of us have donated a body.
Yes, I think that's a...
Could you repeat it?
The question was, maybe I should ask, how many of you are a part of the Deeded Body Program at the university? Okay, quite a significant number. Okay, that is one of the topics that I'm going to talk about here. So, as it relates to organ, tissue, and eye donation, the three gifts that can be given after death as it relates to the Deeded Body Program. Okay?
My husband had an illness that was different than many people's, and I know that they wanted to do some research on the brain.
Okay.
It didn't go to you then, it went to the university, but in a special situation, he did have an autopsy, and then,
Okay.
but I don't think it was deeded body at that point afterwards.
Sure, okay.
They were looking at the brain eventually.
Sure. Yeah, one of the programs that they have is the Neuroimaging Consortium that the University of Iowa is a part of. That is one of the gifts that can be given, is the brain for research. They are actually mapping the human brain right now using proteins. I'm not on the clinical side. I don't understand all of that very well, but it's exciting gifts that can be given. They think that they may be able to discover the source of things like schizophrenia, addiction, Alzheimer's, those kind of things through the mapping of the human brain. Sure. So just briefly how I arrived in this position. In 2007, I got a call from I'm originally from Iowa City. I had relocated to Scottsdale, Arizona after school here. And in 2007, I got a call from my best buddy, Mick, here in Iowa City. And he told me his 9-year-old daughter, Maddie, was very seriously ill, very jaundiced, couldn't keep anything down. They rushed her to the emergency room, and after some time, they discovered that she had a rare liver disease called Wilson's disease. And that is essentially where the body cannot process the copper through the liver, so there's a buildup, and it's quite fatal. So at that time, the nearest transplant center was in Omaha, Nebraska for a liver. So she was airlifted to Omaha and went directly to the top of the national waiting list for a number of reasons, and we don't control the waiting list, just to be clear. But first of all, quite frankly, her age, she was 9 years old. Secondly, outside of the Wilson's disease, she was a great recipient candidate because she was in very good health otherwise. And third, because they gave her basically 24 hours to live without a liver transplant. So the family, thankfully, a family in Missouri, did make the decision to donate. A 14-year-old boy was rendered brain dead in a terrible accident, and they made the decision to donate organs and tissue, and so she received his liver. When she was well enough to travel, they all came down to Scottsdale, where I was working in a resort there, and I put them up in a suite, and we went to breakfast, and they're just telling me the whole story. And this is Maddie, and she was 9 years old, and she did just this at the breakfast table. She was very proud of her scar, and she wanted us all to see it. And they're telling me this story, and I am just like, man, I'd really love to do something in that field someday. You know, it would be so rewarding to be involved in some way. So years later, I relocated back to Iowa City to be close to my mother, who's here in the room, my mother Joan. And I saw an ad for the Iowa Donor Network. So I was very excited to see this come to full circle and be able to be here and speak with you folks today. To kind of put a bow on the Maddie story, we will be attending Maddie's wedding here. She celebrated over 15 years with her new liver, and her wedding will take place here in just a couple weeks in Waverly, Iowa. So a lot of fun. That's sort of my personal story. A little bit about the Iowa Donor Network. We are a not-for-profit organization. We are, as I mentioned, the OPO, or Organ Procurement Organization for the state of Iowa. But we are unique in that we are also the Tissue Recovery Agency. And I'll explain a little bit more about what tissue is in a moment here. We are regulated by CMS on organ and tissue donation and the FDA on tissue and cornea donation. I'll explain the significance of that distinction. We serve over 120 hospitals and 3 transplant centers in the state of Iowa. 2 of the transplant centers are located in Iowa City, and 1 is in Des Moines. We have offices in North Liberty and Altoona, Iowa, and I office out of North Liberty. I live here in Iowa City. Our communication center is staffed with a whole lot of talented people. Organ and tissue recovery specialists who are actually in the ORs and in the tissue recovery suites. Family services are a big part of what we do. So in other words, if you are a donor, your family will get ongoing support, grief therapists, social workers, ongoing communication about where your gifts went and who they benefited. And that's a very important part of what we do as well, making sure that we honor the families of our donors. We also have funeral directors on our staff, which no other OPO in the country has. It just allows us to work and communicate more closely with the funeral homes. So we have relationships with all the funeral homes to make it a cohesive and smooth transition. If, say, somebody wanted an open casket ceremony and they are a donor, we would be cognizant of that during the recovery process. We even ask, what type, do you have a decision on wardrobe? You know, is this a shirtless blouse, that kind of thing. So we're very cognizant of that through the process. We do operate 24/7, 365. Our dedicated tissue recovery suites are in Altoona. And as I mentioned, we are the primary call bank for the Iowa Alliance Eye Bank. We already talked about many. So, a few things I'm going to cover today. I'm going to summarize the many gifts that can be given, life-saving and life-enhancing gifts through donation. And we'll talk about how to register to be an organ, tissue, and eye donor. The eligibility of gifts related to age. And I can tell you that each and every donor is case-by-case evaluation. So there are no hard limits on age for donation. It is a complete evaluation clinically of each and every potential donor. So we recently had an 84-year-old liver donor in the state of Iowa. So I'm going to dispel a few of those myths about age-related donation restrictions. I'm going to detail the recovery and restoration process that allows for any type of funeral service to be performed. And I'll talk a little bit more about those donor family services folks who support your loved ones after your decision for donation. Okay. The one that is not listed up there is probably the most important, and that is the why. Why should I become an organ, tissue, and eye donor? What is the end result? What is who does this benefit and how? I've got a short video here that's going to talk about a procedure called acellular dermal matrix, which is an amazing procedure. It is donated skin tissue. And the skin is recovered from the backs, the buttocks, or leg areas of the donor. That tissue is obviously used for many, many things. It's absolutely life-saving for burn patients. This acellular dermal matrix procedure, though, they actually remove the cells from the skin tissue. Don't ask me how, I don't. Maybe somebody in the room has the clinical knowledge of how that works. And then now they can take that tissue, and if a woman has a mastectomy, they can do the reconstruction, the breast reconstruction, during the same surgery as the mastectomy now. So this donor tissue is acellular. They build the scaffolding for the breast reconstruction during the same surgery. So that woman wakes up from a mastectomy and has her reconstruction in place. I was teaching this class at Grinnell, a hospital in Grinnell, a few months back, and before we got to the end of this video, I heard from the back of the room a lady yell, "When the hell did they start doing that?" Because she had a breast cancer survivor from many, many years ago, and she went on to explain how difficult. She had to wait 8 or 9 months. They took the grafts from her own body, a whole separate surgery. So this is a pretty remarkable advancement. They can also use this for cleft palate repair. Skin tissue is very versatile and can be used to treat so many people and impact the lives of so many. Anyone want to take a guess before I play this video as to the oldest skin donor in the state of Iowa?
Older than 84?
Yep, 106. And that is because skin tissue has no upper age limit. As a matter of fact, the older the donor, the better the graft. And the reason is because as we get older, we lose the collagen in our skin, and that makes for a more effective graft. So this one gift alone impacts so many lives, but I'm going to let the video play and kind of explain part of the why.
Having cancer is bad enough, but to wake up without a part of you that's always been part of your identity, that's even worse. And if there's something we can do to avoid that for our patients, that's a wonderful thing.
I am the third generation in my family to have breast cancer. The disease claimed my maternal grandmother, and my mother had it when she was in her 40s. Reconstruction was not even an option for her back then. I was diagnosed a few years ago with a couple of precancerous conditions for which I was taking medication we were keeping an eye on. But during that period of time, I was also exploring my options should I ever be diagnosed with breast cancer. And sure enough, 3 years after that, I was diagnosed. And I knew that I wanted to not just beat the disease, I wanted it gone from my life forever. And not only that, I wanted to emerge from it stronger and even better than before. And to that end, I was exploring reconstruction options. I was very blessed to have a couple of friends who had been through the breast cancer experience and had some recommendations for me. I was very fortunate to end up with Dr. Wilkins, who explained reconstruction options to me.
The reason I'm very interested in this is because it has a huge impact on women's lives. Mastectomy, as our research and others have shown, has a significant negative impact on body image, psychosocial functioning, and overall quality of life. We've also shown with our research that breast reconstruction goes a long way in reversing some of these adverse effects. One of the innovations that have really changed the landscape is the introduction of what's called acellular dermal matrix, or ADM. Acellular dermal matrix is human donated tissue from donors or families who have been generous enough to contribute these tissues from their loved ones. It is processed sterilely to prevent tissue rejection when it's used in new patients. And without these very generous families, we could not have this as an option for reconstruction patients. In contrast with the traditional approach, the one-stage approach uses the human donated tissue and the final implant, which are placed at the time of the mastectomy, so that the woman wakes up with her new breast or a new breast. It essentially makes you feel normal, so that when you look in the mirror in the morning, you see you. You don't see, a cancer patient.
The surgery went so well that the very next morning when Dr. Wilkins came to see me, I was actually sitting up in a chair, not in my bed, but in a chair next to my bed, having breakfast, reading a book. I felt that good.
I think that it's a lesson going forward for anybody else who wants to know the options that are there. Having the donated tissue, to me it means more. It means somebody else thought enough of other people to want to do this. And to me, that's fantastic.
It's just wonderful to see her, living a normal life and feeling good about herself. If you do what I do for a living, that's what it's all about.
This surgery that I had was made possible through the gift of donation. I truly thank them every day of my life for their generous gift, and I really do hope that they understand what it means.
Isn't that pretty amazing? And now, the skin tissue recipient will repopulate the cells of that donated skin tissue with their own cells. So it truly becomes their skin. It's just an amazing procedure. Another application is in the case of an omphalocele, where an infant is born with their organs outside of their body. So this same skin tissue from donors is used as a protective cone while those organs settle back into an infant's body. So now skin is considered, that's tissue donation. just want to be clear, I'm going to talk about organ donation and eye donation as well, but skin is a tissue, okay? And I'm going to talk about the different pathways that can lead to, death pathways that can lead to different gifts being given. So this is an important piece of legislation. This is the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act of 1968. What this did was it allowed for, it legalized the transplantation of organs, and it made it illegal to sell organs and tissues in the United States. Okay? The other big thing that this act did was it allowed for first-person authorization. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that on the next slide, but this is very important. What it means is when a person makes a donor designation, a living person makes that donor designation. So, if a patient is not registered to be a donor, your next of kin will be contacted to see if they would like to make that gift. I think it's so critical that you talk about what your wishes are with your loved ones. It just makes that process so much easier for them if they know what your wishes are. And legally and ethically, it's our responsibility as the OPO and the hospitals to carry out those wishes. There are about 30,000 deaths a year in the state of Iowa. We are notified of about a third of those because there are a lot of the hospitals are actually required to notify us, but other agencies are not. So, we're working right now to try and get EMS services, medical examiners. Some of them do a great job of notifying us, but as you can imagine, some people's wishes are not honored if we don't know about their death. Any questions about this? Okay. So there are basically 4 ways to register. I can drop some of these off if you would like, but this is a simple pamphlet that you could just fill out and mail in to go on the Organ, Tissue, and Eye Registry. There's our website, iowadonornetwork.org. By far the most common way is about 95% of the people in the state register when they get their driver's license. If you have a little red heart or the word donor in red on your driver's license, you are on the registry, okay? You will stay on that registry unless you contact us to remove yourself. Now, if you are going back to the deeded body program, because I know a number of people raised their hand, if you are a part of the deeded body program, you cannot also be a tissue and organ donor, okay? With the exception of corneas. That is something that can be arranged. And the deeded body program is a great cause. I think it's fantastic. But I just wanted to make it clear that you cannot donate organs and tissues first and then be in the deeded body program following that, with the exception of corneas. Okay? The 4th way is something called Logan's Law. This was a young boy from Charles City, Iowa, who was an avid hunter and fisherman and big wrestler. He was 14 years old. He came home one day and showed his parents that he had registered to be a donor and was very proud of that. Parents have to give consent for anyone under 18, but he was very proud of that, so they knew his wishes. He was tragically rendered brain dead in an ATV accident. So his family knew what he wanted, so he was able to give many, many gifts. Internal organs as well as tissues that impacted over 200 people from one donor. You may have heard of Lily Left. That is Logan's sister. She will be wrestling for the University of Iowa's women's wrestling team next year. When she won her 3rd state championship in Iowa this year, and she started wrestling because of her brother. When he passed, it was to honor him. When she won her 3rd straight championship in wrestling, the young girl that had received Logan's heart was in the crowd with her family. So pretty neat legacy. So Logan's Law it dictates that if you are not on the registry and you go to get a hunting, fishing, or fur trapping license, they will ask you if you'd like to sign up. In the first 3 months, an additional 1,000 registrants were on the registry as a result of this law. So why do people choose donation? Doing the right thing. People of Iowa are pretty altruistic in general, pretty generous giving people. Helping others, the legacy piece of this, your loved one living on through the recipient. By far the most common one I hear is believing something good came from the death. It really helps with the grieving process. Mallory Wells speaks really eloquently on, as a volunteer for us, about just how much her father's gifts help them through the grieving process and help them feel like something good came from that death. So we have a lot of partners throughout the state of Iowa. As I mentioned, the hospitals are required to report deaths to us, but we work with all of these other agencies, long-term care facilities, EMS, law enforcement, medical examiners that I'll talk about in a minute, and funeral directors. So let's get down to the 2 death pathways and what gifts can be given as a result of the manner in which someone passes. So on the left-hand side, you see imminent death. Okay, that is a person who is on a mechanical ventilator and is meeting certain clinical triggers that I'll talk about in a minute. That person, that patient, we are notified of when they meet those triggers. And that pathway makes that patient eligible for organ, tissue, and eye donation. So a lot of people, when they think of the Iowa Donor Network, they think, okay, that's organ donation. Well, the specific way in which you pass dictates whether or not you can be an organ donor. The person must be on a mechanical ventilator and meeting certain clinical triggers. In that case, we are notified ahead of that person's death, or in the case if someone were brain dead, we are notified, and then that person has a potential for organ donation. Is that clear? Okay. The second way is ED and inpatient death, so emergency department, or if you were to die, if someone were to die in the hospital. Now this is when the nurses notify us after time of death has been pronounced. Okay, and that person is eligible for tissue donation, such as what we talked about earlier. One example is skin donation, or eye donation. So I'm going to talk about the imminent death or the organ donation pathway first. So when we're talking about organ donation, we're talking about the 6 solid internal organs. You can see them listed here. Over on the right-hand side is the transportation time. So we're really under the clock when it comes to organ donation. For example, hearts and lungs. What usually happens is the surgical team is flown in to the Iowa City Airport. They are taken by ambulance, lights and sirens to the University Hospital. Recovery takes place back in the ambulance, back in the jet to the recipient. We got 4 to 6 hours from that recovery to that transplantation process starting within the recipient. Out of these 6 solid internal organs, we have kidneys and liver, which also can save 2 other lives. They almost 100% of the time split the kidneys up so that they go to 2 separate recipients. And the liver oftentimes, because it's regenerative, a lobe will be taken, recovered from the liver, and possibly transplanted into an infant. And that liver will then grow with the infant, as well as saving the other life from the full liver. So 6 solid internal organs can save up to 8 lives. You can see the different time frames here. With kidneys, we have up to 36 hours because we actually own kidney pumps at the Iowa Donor Network. I've driven a kidney all the way to Sioux Falls, South Dakota before. So it was on the pump, so it was okay and ready to be transplanted. Any questions on organ donation? Yes, sir.
I know with certain organ donors, they have the recipient needs to take drugs the rest of their life in order to not reject the organ. Is that true of all of these 6 organs, do you know?
Not entirely anymore.
What's the question?
There's been I'm sorry?
What's the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, when a person is an organ donor recipient, are they bound to taking drugs for the rest of their life in order so that the organ will not be rejected? The answer is there have been great strides made in this area, and one of them I'm going to talk about in a minute here with a tissue donation called vertebral bodies, the vertebrae. They are using the stem cells from that now as an immunotherapy for organ transplant patients. So at one time, certainly that person was going to be drug dependent for probably the rest of their life to avoid rejection, but now they are taking these stem cells from the actual donor themselves and introducing them to the recipient. So then it allows for a much, much lower rejection rate. Does that answer the question? Thank you. Anyone have a guess of what the most in-demand organ is on the national waiting list? Did someone say kidney? Yep. About 85% of the people on the national waiting list are waiting for a kidney. That's part of the reason why the kidneys never go in block to the recipient. They're always separated because the demand is so high. So because of that specific ventilated patient meeting clinical triggers, only 3 in 1,000 people have the potential to be an organ donor. Does that surprise anyone? I know it's very rare. However, we are getting better and better at discovering more donors that are eligible now. For example, the HOPE Act was passed, which allows an HIV positive donor to donate to an HIV positive recipient. When COVID started, there was a hard stop on organ donations from anybody who died from COVID. Since then, hundreds of COVID positive patients have donated their organs and successfully transplanted with no issues whatsoever. So it is extremely rare, but we are getting better at the process, and I'll explain that in a minute. So there are 106,000 people on the organ transplant waiting list, and there are 600 plus Iowans. I get these numbers every week, and last week it was 674 Iowans are waiting for a life-saving organ. In 2022, 115 Iowans were able to donate organs, and that resulted in 347 organs were successfully transplanted because of the kidneys being separated and the liver being able to be regenerative and used in more than one recipient. We did hit a milestone last year in September. We exceeded 1 million successful transplants in the United States, which was a major breakthrough. And 17 people die each day waiting for an organ transplant. And every 9 minutes, another name is added to the list. So you can see the need is great. Having said all of that, there is good news here. This is the first time ever we have exceeded 42,000 organ donors in the organ transplantations in the country. That's averaging 133 organ transplants happen every day in the United States in 2022. You can see the impact of eye donation and tissue donation, 2.5 million. Very different pathway for passing with eye and tissue. Remember, that patient doesn't have to be ventilated. They don't, this is when we're notified after time of death. So I want to talk a little bit about tissue and eye donation. So once again, now we're looking at the right-hand side when we are notified after cardiac scan still in time of death has been pronounced. This is one of my favorite slides because there are so many gifts that can be given outside of organ donation. And a lot more patients qualify to be able to give these gifts than the organ passing pathway. So corneas, obviously, a lot of times they're separated as well to restore sight to 2 individuals. Bones and tendons. So this is musculoskeletal tissue. This tissue is used for a lot of different applications. The long bones in the arms and legs are recovered and replaced with a prosthetic so that open casket viewing is absolutely still an option. And those bones are oftentimes used to replace joints. They have often been used to save someone from potential amputation of a limb, possibly, a diabetic person. They can be used for dental surgeries and also for spinal fusion. Okay, so they can use the bones to help fuse someone's spine as well. The tendons are recovered with the bones, and those are, as you can imagine, used for a lot of athletic type injuries. Anterior cruciate ligaments, Achilles damage, rotator cuff. Heart valves are absolutely life-saving. For folks that with congenital heart defects or other valve disease. When we're in the unfortunate situation that we're recovering a heart valves from an infant, that gift is even more priceless because it saves the recipient many, many surgeries over the course of their life. Because when it is a donated heart valve, that heart valve can grow with the recipient rather than having to keep doing surgeries to replace their heart valves as they grow. That makes sense?
Yes.
Explain that okay? Skin, we've already talked about quite a bit. And then veins, the saphenous and femoral veins can be recovered along with the arteries. Those can be used for bypass grafts to restore circulation to the heart and extremities, and also for people on dialysis who may have a vein that breaks down. They can be used for that graft as well. The ones on the right are slightly newer recoveries that are taking place. The aortic iliac for trauma patients requiring vascular surgery or bypass of disease vessels. Vertebral bodies is one that is, I mentioned earlier about the immunotherapies right now. They're using the stem cells to create immunotherapies for transplant recipients. But I was at a conference where they were talking about the potential applications of vertebral bodies. Obviously, these are recovered from the vertebrae area. What they think that they can do, or will be doing shortly, is creating a national bone marrow bank, so that when someone needs a bone marrow transplant, rather than finding a suitable donor who has to go in and spend overnight in the hospital, have a painful procedure for that bone marrow transplant, they will essentially have it sitting on the shelves. So this national bone marrow bank, they think they can save the bone marrow for up to 25 years. And you think about the impact on leukemia patients alone that would have, it's just remarkable. So that is the vision for vertebral bodies. Adipose is basically fat cells that when somebody receives a bone transplantation, they introduce the donor's adipose as well to help with that acceptance process. And then costal cartilage is oftentimes used for facial reconstruction for trauma patients and so forth. So all of these gifts can be given after time of death has been pronounced. Okay? So there are many, many more patients who die in this way than the other way that allows for organ donation. Okay? Now each and every gift, whether it's organ donation or tissue donation, is going to be clinically evaluated. That donor is going to be clinically evaluated in each and every case. They are all case dependent. So there are no upper age limits on any donor. It depends entirely on that medical history, and each and every potential donor is evaluated based on that. Okay, so there's no, once you're 80, you can't be a heart donor. That does not exist. There's an evaluation that takes place every time. So this is what they are required to notify us of all emergency room and inpatient deaths, regardless of age, medical history, verbalized or documented donation decisions. And they have to call us within 1 hour of time of death, because we have 24 hours from the time of death to begin the recovery process. So what that means is, to your families, someone will be, the nurse will notify us at time of death within 1 hour, and then we, if you are registered, yes, we will contact your loved one, and keeping in mind we do only have that 24-hour time frame. So I do want to make you aware that it is a very sensitive time, obviously, to be calling, and our folks are trained and certified in how to make that approach to your family members. That's why I always say, if you can let your loved ones know ahead of time what your wishes are, that is a huge weight or burden off their shoulders. So your family member will be contacted if you are a suitable donor. So the very first thing that happens when we are notified of a death is the clinical folks get to work to determine whether or not you're a suitable donor. If you are deemed not a suitable donor, then your family will never be contacted. In other words, we're going to notify or talk to your family about donation if it can't result in donation. Okay? If you are not on the registry, but are a suitable donor, then your family will be contacted to see if they would like to make that decision for donation for you. So here are just some sort of myths and misconceptions about who can be a donor. You can see on the tissue side, we are regulated by the FDA. So it's just like donating blood. All those 50 or 60 questions that they ask when you go to donate blood will be asked of your next of kin to qualify for tissue donation. Okay? On organ donation, you can see most categories are yes here because organs are it's so rare, and you know, we're discovering new things about acceptability or suitability of the donor. Case dependent is cancer, and it really depends on when that cancer was, what type of cancer it was, and again, our clinicians do an evaluation of that. Any questions here? Yes?
So somebody who dies in bed, their loved one cannot determine the cause of the time of death?
They are going to,
What's the question?
the question is if someone dies in bed and the last time known alive can't be determined, essentially, is that, yeah. Then what happens in that case? Well, forensic people would be on the scene, for example, medical examiner or EMS services, and they would try to give an estimate, best estimate of the last time known alive. Then I would go to the network, would be notified, and you know, if it falls within that 24-hour time frame, then they will be evaluated for suitability for donation. Does that answer the question? Okay.
So are there certain medications or things that we might currently be on that you would ask us about if we register ahead, or just wait till the time comes we know we want to donate, that's when we evaluate?
Yep, it will be at the time of death. They are not going to hold those medical records and assume that you're on the same medications. Now, we have access to almost all of the electronic medical records in the hospitals in the state of Iowa. So we are allowed to look at what your medications and medical history are before your family is ever approached or anything along those lines. So I can say that as far as medications go, outside of intravenous drug use, most everything is acceptable for donation. Okay. So we always ask our hospitals to call us before they release to the funeral home, and they are very good at this. They're very compliant, because once the embalming process begins, then donation is out of the question. And as I mentioned, an open casket viewing is absolutely possible with any form of donation. Okay, so we talked about the medical examiner, I'm sorry, there's no place else I want to be. I just want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. If I look at my watch, I apologize. But certain deaths may fall under medical examiner jurisdiction. So we have a very close working relationship with the medical examiners in the state of Iowa, and almost all the time they will do a visual autopsy and then allow us to do the tissue recovery prior to their autopsy. As a result, they just give us very specific instructions. They say, I want you to stay away from this area, this is how many tubes I want, this is what, you know, and so we follow their directions very closely, and as a result, we have a 98% release rate from our medical examiners. So those are the folks that did not pass in the hospital, but we are notified by the medical examiner, and then that evaluation process begins. Okay, and so these are just our obligation and our responsibilities as the Organ and Tissue Recovery Agency in the state of Iowa. We just never ever make any assumptions about somebody's suitability for donation based on any of these factors. Religion, race, medical condition, age. Each and every person is evaluated and treated as a potential donor. So tissue donors in Iowa, there were almost 1,000 in 2022. And each and every tissue donor impacts the lives of 50 to 300 people. So one donor can impact up to 300 lives through their gifts. So you can do the math, take 979 times any number between 50 and 300, and that's the impact of tissue donation. And that's the lady who received the breast reconstruction was a recipient of tissue. Okay, our donor family care folks that I mentioned to you before, nothing is more important to us than honoring the memories of our donors and honoring their families for supporting donation, as well as, of course, saving lives. But there are lots of opportunities to honor our donor families. We are the folks who will send a letter to your loved ones that would say, at first it starts out very generally, a 32-year-old woman in Ottumwa received your loved one's heart valve. Okay. Then as the process goes along, a lot of times the donor families will want to meet the donor recipient and vice versa, and we will help arrange that for them if all parties agree. So that's some of the things our donor family folks do. Here is an example of a moment of silence. It takes place prior to tissue or organ recovery. And we do call it recovery now. They used to use the term harvest, and it sounded a little impersonal, dehumanizing. We have all kinds of events. As I said, there are donor family events all the time, candlelighting vigils. We make those arrangements if the recipient and the donor would like to get together, and a lot of times that takes place at our memorial garden. Just to let you know, April is National Donate Life Month. That's celebrated all across the country. I just wanted to show an example real quick before we wrap up of the impact of one particular donor. So this is one lady from Ottumwa, Iowa, who impacted 327 lives through tissue donation. So this referral was made to us after time of death had been pronounced. 278 grafts from Katie's gifts from bone and connective tissue were able to be transplanted. 45 skin grafts, 2 heart valves, and 2 corneas saved, restored the vision for 2 different patients. So that's one tissue donor. If you'd like more information, you can always reach me. I'll be happy to come anytime you'd like to speak to you personally, your loved ones personally. We can arrange that. It'd be my pleasure to do so. And but there is a Learn tab on iowadonornetwork.org where you can get a lot more information, but I'd rather just come and see you again, so let me know if I can do that. And that is me. So any other questions at this time? Yes, sir.
Although my kids were born here, Midwest, the whole family now lives in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Is this likely to be a problem of any sort?
No.
They are expecting me to be cremated.
Okay.
They expect to get the ashes.
Okay.
but that is not a problem. As long
Not
as-
an issue whatsoever. We have, the question is, this gentleman's family all lives on the East Coast, and the plan is that his wishes are that he would like to be cremated and the family receive the ashes. That is absolutely an option. All the time, the cremains after tissue donation, it happens all the time. So that won't be an issue.
If you're determined to not be a good donor, you can still donate your body to research.
Absolutely, yeah.
How does that work?
Well, we don't work in conjunction. The question is if you're a registered donor but you're deemed not suitable for donation, can you donate for example, the deeded body program, right? Is that what you're referring to? Okay, so that involves the coordination and you expressing your wishes to your loved ones. Okay, it can be on a will. However, wills are not usually readily available. I would really suggest if that's the route you would like to go, see if I can be a tissue or organ donor first, and then if not, the deeded body program second. It's just so important that your family understand what your wishes are so that you could then be on the registry for the Iowa Donor Network, but also on the registry for the deeded body program as a second option. But the people who are always going to be contacted are your next of kin, okay, or those who have the legal authority to make medical decisions for you, okay?
Bill and I are body donators,
Mhm.
and they said to call your transportation within 10 hours of death.
Okay. So,
So you've got some places it's like, what, 30 hours or 24 hours or
for transportation of the kidney, for example, yeah.
well, of the body to get it to this pool,
Okay.
or the more.
So we have 24 hours from time of death to begin the tissue recovery process in the case of that. The first thing that's going to happen is we are going to access the medical records, your medical records, to determine if you're a suitable donor. That does not take a lot of time, a suitable potential donor. If you are not at that time, then the transportation to the deeded body program will take place. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay. The key to it all is making sure your loved ones know what your wishes are. If they don't know that you would also potentially like to be a donor outside of the deeded body, then they aren't going to know that those are your wishes. So,
Follow on a little bit. So the organ, the turn down for an organ donor, does your network then tell the deeded body program, how does that information get to the next?
right. So we will have had a conversation with the next of kin or that legal guardian who has those. They would know that. So yeah. So then we would, if we determined, and I'm sorry, the question was, how does the timing of that process work? If you are deemed not suitable for donation, who notifies the deeded body program if that were the case? And again, yeah, that's just, it's got to be coordinated ahead of time with that person who's going to be contacted by us. Because we will be happy if you are not deemed suitable, we will be happy to notify the deeded body program and help make those transportation arrangements.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think, Steve,
Yeah.
they were concerned about a time frame. I mean, the deeded body program, do they have to be notified within a certain period of time, is that right?
The way I understand it.
Yes.
They want 10 hours.
Yeah, they do, and I'm not, I believe it's 10 hours, that's good information. Yeah, we would be able to make that determination far ahead of that 10-hour time frame lapsing, to be able to make that transition. So, some things are, you know, there may be a little bit more, like in the case of organ donation, you know, serologies may have to go for evaluation, that sort of thing, to determine suitability of the recipient. But in the case of the deeded body program, you know, that we will be determining if you should choose to first explore donation and then the deeded body program, we will be making that determination in a fairly short amount of time of suitability.
With assisted death, it's, you could ask to be put on a ventilator?
That's an interesting question. I've never had that one come up before.
What's the question?
Uh,
What's the question?
I'm not sure. The question is with an assisted death.
What's the question?
The question is with an assisted death, could you then, as a part of that dying process, be asked to be ventilated, to be asked to be intubated as a part of that person assisting you in your death?
Assisted death isn't legal.
I was about to say, I'm not sure of the legality
No,
of,
it's not.
it's not even legal in the United States, is
No,
it?
medical aid in dying is legal in several states, including
Oh.
Oregon, Washington DC, a lot of other states, New Mexico, California.
Okay.
But not in Iowa. The bill has been put in the House a few times, but it's never made it.
Okay.
It's never been passed.
Well, thank you for the assist on that. I wasn't sure of the legal aspects of assisted death.
Not yet legal, I guess.
Right.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
I suppose that theoretically, though, you could say, look, I would like to be declared declared dead, brain dead, or whatever the case may be, but I'd like to be intubated so that my organs can stay viable. Yeah, I mean, that that would be one possibility. Yeah, I never had that question or thought about that. That's a great question. Yes?
People call.
And we were there to hear it.
We do. Anything involving donation, your loved ones will never get a bill. Okay, sorry.
If someone dies here at Oak Knoll, would it be the funeral home that's called to call you, or do you call you before the funeral home? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah,
The timeline is not very.
Right.
Question?
The question was if someone were to pass here on property at Oak Knoll, who is the funeral home the first phone call, or is it us who are called? Well, the long story short is the funeral home is going to be a decision by your legal next of kin, right? With selecting the funeral home. Okay? So your legal next of kin then will be, that decision will be discussed with them as prior to, from the funeral director. As mentioned, we have licensed funeral directors on our staff as well, so that they will notify us of the death, and then the next of kin will make a decision about donation. That's the way it theoretically should work every time. Does it work that way every time? No, There are times where a funeral home may be notified and they begin the embalming process. And so,
it would be our responsibility to spell all that out as far as
right.
what we would want done before.
Yeah. Ideally, the funeral home director would notify us of the death prior to beginning the preparation or embalming. Doesn't happen 100% of the time because they aren't required to. Only the hospitals are required to notify us of every death 100% of the time. Yeah.
So here at Oak Knoll, we would contact the nurses, and they know the right people to call at the right time.
Right. So the question was, so here at Oak Knoll, we would contact the nurses and they would know the right people to contact all the time. Yes, and I would love to get some badge pulls and trigger cards with phone numbers of our organization for those nurses. And if they'd like to have a whole entirely separate education with me, I'd be happy to conduct that. So maybe that is something I will explore with. I would love to. That's mostly what I do, is go educate nurses in the hospitals about how to notify us.
Thank you. What do you think is the most important thing you've told us?
The most
Before we
important.
say goodbye.
Right. Oh. I think probably I would say twofold. First of all, there are many, many gifts outside of organ donation that can be given.
We would know as we begin to talk to family members about this. That's what we would probably need. David Anson maybe would be the one that we would get.
Yeah, I said this. David was the one who contacted us and who contacted me. I am happy to supply any collateral materials. I have extended care facilities that every single one of their new residents receives in their welcome packet information on organ tissue and eye donation. So I'd be happy to come back as often as you like and bring whatever materials. I'll connect with David on that though and see what would be the best information to share with you, or the easiest one.
We think we should all have that, so let's make a plan to get that information.
Okay.
To all of us.
Sure.
To Oak Knoll.
Okay.
We would want it in our mailbox.
Is that the best way to do it?
Well, I don't know.
So put it in your mailbox?
Well,
Probably you need to ask somebody. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Put it on the form,
Beg your pardon?
if you put it on the news form and to fill out,
Sure.
that would be something that we do.
Okay.
Was it David
We'll
that
get some
invited
stuff
you
to put at the reception desk. How about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
The reception desk?
We'll put them at the reception desk.
Yeah, I think everybody should get one.
well,
No, I didn't.
it
All right, well,
would try.
you've been very generous with your time. If there aren't any questions, I feel like I've really taken advantage of your time here this evening.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot.
Good, good.